Thank you.
And just tap, tap.
Tap. Tap. Tap. It works. Cool. Can you all see it when I stand here? Yes. Whew. Okay, hi. Thank you all for being here. It's really cool to see you all. My name is Shanti, and last summer I graduated from the Willem de Kooning Academy in Rotterdam. And I graduated with project Skiep. Now, for those of you who are not so familiar with the language of the high north of the Netherlands, also known as Friesland, Skiep is actually literally translated as sheep, and I think it is already clear, or it might become clear very soon why this project is called Project Skiep. But first, I would like to talk to you about this bag, or this illustration of this bag. See, this bag was made out of 1800 grams Schonebeker sheep wool. It was produced in 7 days by 12 pairs of hands, and it has traveled over 135 kilometers in its journey from raw material to final product. So in Project Skiep, I want to emphasize every chapter that a product goes through before it is finished. So I want to pay special attention to every maker, every skill, every process that is obtained in this journey. And I would like to take you along on this journey, but first I would like you to meet someone. This is Chris. Chris is an Australian merino sheep who escaped from a farm a couple of years ago. And he wandered around for some years, and by the time the owners managed to catch him, he had grown over 42 kilos of wool. Now, for some comparison, a regular sheep that is shorn every year grows 2 to 4 kilos a year. Chris had 42 kilos. And a regular sheep is also shorn in about 5 minutes or even less, but it took the shearer 45 minutes to shear him. And from this huge pile of wool, you could easily make around 30 sweaters. So this is a very strange story, but what I think is even more strange is that the amount of money the owner of Chris would get would be, any guesses?
8 cents.
Oh, hey, that's strange. Okay, so it's €4.20. Right, okay, so these 42 kilos are worth €4.20, and that is because the wool prices have never been as low as they are these days. A white fleece is sold for around 10 cents a kilo, and a black, brown or mixed fleece is sold for about 5 cents a kilo when lucky, but often the farmers need to pay to get rid of their material. And this brings me to our value determination of wool. So on one hand, we see wool as a waste product. In the Netherlands, we produce almost 2 million kilos of wool each year. Most of it is shipped to China to be used in the automotive industry, or it is these days also used in more modern projects like insulation for building. But we have a huge waste stream. But on the other hand, wool is seen as a luxury product, because chances are that if you own a sweater that is 100% wool, you paid more than €80 for it. So this whole concept really got me startled. And when I moved to Friesland at the end of 2020, I moved in with a shepherd, Hilde. And I got to experience the qualities and the properties of wool firsthand. So I helped her to take care of the herd during the winter months, and I helped her sorting the fleeces to sell them. And she explained to me how difficult it was for her to sell her wool. So I decided to dive deep into this topic, and I bought an old cargo bike. I fixed it, and my plan was to cycle through every step in the production process, using the province of Friesland as my investigation zone, as my playground, so to say. So after a couple of weeks of careful planning, preparation, getting in contact with the right people, I was ready to hop on my bike and start my trip. And my trip would take 7 days, so cycling through the whole province. And during this trip, I wasn't alone, luckily. I was accompanied by Aniek van Santen. She's a very dear friend and a brilliant photographer, and she cycled with me all the 7 days. And the illustrations that you see in this project and also in the final product, they were made by Joska van Oosten. And she didn't cycle with us, but she really helped me to share my story and my ideas in a visual way to the audience. So then it was on to the first step in the production process, which is, of course, harvesting the material. And this I did with Hilde. Hilde is a proud owner of a flock of Drentse heideschapen and Schonebekerschapen. And next to her you see her friend Bamboo, who is very necessary in this type of work. And Hilde was on the heather during the spring and summer months. And I would visit her often. During the winter months, I would help her to move the sheep from one field to the other. And a visit would go something like this. Maybe we should turn the volume down a little bit. Beautiful sheep. Okay, so Hilde gifted me this fleece, and this fleece used to belong to Hapje, which was a Schonebeker sheep. Is it still on? No, it's off, but it's fine, right? It's on? Oh, perfect. Okay, better. She gifted me this fleece from Hapje, and fun fact, Hapje, translated to English, is actually bite. And she was always at the back of the herd because she had to take the last bite, so she was very slow sheep. But she left these 2 kilos of very beautiful white wool. And the next step, of course, was to wash the wool. So I did it together with Hilde. We rinsed the wool with hot water, not too hot, to make sure that it didn't felt. And we rinsed it a couple of times to make sure this kind of chocolate milky substance had left the wool. And then we let it dry in the sun, and we manually took out all the leftover branches and leaves, all the parts that sheep usually use as lunch. And then it was on to the next step, which is the carding. And I will get to that. But the carding I did with Bart and Tanja Hogeboom from Kaarderij Wollust. They own this really small carding factory, one of the few in the Netherlands. And carding can basically be seen as combing the wool. So you're combing the wool to ensure that all the fibers are pointing in the same direction, which makes it easier to process further down the process. Right. So carding is done on in a carding machine, which contains very big drums that turn, and they have all these metal pins, and they transfer the wool from one drum to the other. And on the final drum, everything is collected and turn into this huge blanket, basically. And it's a very loud process. So this is one blanket, and by the end of the day, by the end of carding, I ended up with 4 of these blankets. Now, as you might remember, I had 2 kilos of wool, which means that one blanket is half a kilo. So it really gets this kind of cotton candy substance, and it's a lot of wool, which also brings me to the first problem I encountered. And that was related to the next step, which is the spinning. So Tanja from the carding factory, she explained to me if I wanted to spin 2 kilos of wool by myself, it would take me ages. I would probably be graduated by the time I was finished. But also to turn on a spinning machine wouldn't be profitable enough. So I had to find a solution. And after a lot of thinking, brainstorming, my solution looked like this. So I invited all these kinds of spinners from all of the north of the Netherlands. And we gathered on the heather in Delleburen, where Hilde was with her herd. And yeah, I welcomed everyone. I told them how very happy I was that they were there. And everyone brought their own spinning wheel. Annick and I arranged the spinning wheels on the heather. And people keep saying that it looks like some sort of orchestra setup. And yeah, I guess it could be an orchestra, just with a different sound than you're imagining or used to. And we started spinning. It was beautiful weather. Everyone was very happy to be there, and a lot of people didn't know each other. And there were young people, old people, people who were professional spinners, but also people who were just doing it for a hobby or hadn't spun in years. So there were these like tiny master classes in between, and people were helping each other out. And it was a really good day. But what also made it even more beautiful is that Hilde was at the same header, and she was walking with her herd to the further end of the header. But first she would have to pass us. And that made for a very beautiful encounter. This is a child-friendly presentation. So here we have some more close-ups from this very cool encounter. Yeah, it was so nice. And also the spinners, I interviewed every one of them, and they were like, it's such an amazing experience to see this source of material and then the meeting between the source and the craftsman who is working on, well, basically the hair of their friend. And it was very, very beautiful to see. And also sheep are very curious by nature. So at first they were like, what is this? And they were just looking at us. And then they moved a bit to the right and looking at us. And then they would just walk in circles around. And yeah, eventually just chill down, lay down. And, just and during this whole process, during the whole day, I asked every spinner to come with me individually, and I interviewed them. I asked them who was the person who brought them in contact with this craft, who taught them, what was it in wool, in working with this material that kind of kept them coming back. And yeah, it was beautiful because this lady, she got really emotional, and she said, this is the best day, I will never forget it. It's so cool to be part of this. And all the interviews are in audio file on the website, so if you like, you can listen to them. But also they are written down as stories in the final product. Yeah, and by the end of the day, we had spun all the yarn. We did it in a couple of hours, excluding coffee and soup breaks, of course. And all the spinners labeled the yarn that they spun, so I could later see who made which yarn. And what is also very fascinating, you can see it a little bit on this picture, is that spinning is almost like writing. Everyone has their own signature, their own handwriting. So some people spin very thin yarn, others spin it thick, others are not so consistent, but that's also fine. It's their own signature in this project. So then it was on to the next step, which was the dyeing. And the dyeing I did at Textiel Instituut Hawar in Oldenbekoop with Harm Harms and Meini Wardenier. And here I encountered my second kind of big problem, because I was looking for this material to use as a pigment. And I'm a nature lover, so I was thinking, what plant can I harvest without feeling guilty? And it took me a while, but finally I realized I can harvest birch, young birch leaves. And this is because sheep walk on the heather to eat the young trees, to make sure the trees don't grow and turn the heather into a forest. So they're very necessary. And I guess the sheep would only be kind of angry with me for taking their lunch, but further on the trees would be harvested anyway. So I spent a couple of hours on the heather harvesting the leaves. And when I arrived at Hawar, Meini told me that I misread the recipe and I needed way more kilos than I actually harvested. So I had to improvise. And luckily the cow parsley, which is fluitenkruid, for people who don't know this very weird name, I don't know, cow parsley. But the cow parsley was also in bloom, and it is a big plant, so it's easy to harvest and also one of the very delicious meals of the sheep. So I mean, I had to get creative and improvise, and this is the way that I did it. And I think it suits the story also very well. So they explained to me how to dye the yarn. First make a mordant bath with alum, which is aluin. And then we had these huge tubs with birch leaves and cow parsley separate. And we let it simmer all night, so the dyeing took us 2 days. And by the end of the day, by the end of the second day, I used 2 post-mordants, and this ensures some sort of a chemical reaction in the dye bath and changes the color slightly. And this was the final result. So as you can see, there are 9 different colors or color tones that refer to the 9 spinners that spun the yarn. So every color has its own, every spinner has its own color. And the yellow comes from the birch leaves and the green comes from the cow parsley. And then it was on to the final step in the process, which was the weaving. And the weaving I did with Roelie Polman in Sneek. She's a brilliant weaver, and she explained to me how to do it because I'd never did it before. And she actually got me this excited that I now have my own weaving loom standing in the living room, and I'm learning to weave myself. Yeah, but she explained to me how to set up the warp. We had to untangle all the yarn, of course. And we set up the weaving loom, which was a very big project. It took us the whole day. And by the end of the first day, we were ready with setting up the weaving loom. And I got to spin, or I got to weave the first part. Yeah, so this was once from left to right. Eventually it went a little faster, but I had to get used to it, of course. So the second day I wove, I made the rest of the fabric. And it's funny because it eventually turned out to become fabric. And of course, you might remember, we started with raw wool. And it even turned out, here's the last part of the weaving the second day. Yeah, it ended up in an actual product, which I have here. And now, as you might remember, this bag is made out of 1800 grams Schonebeker sheep wool. It is made in 7 days by 12 pairs of hands, and it has traveled over 135 kilometers in its journey from raw material to final product. But of course, that's not all, because my goal is to share this story and to share this information about how a product comes to be, and to get this awareness that a product doesn't just appear, it doesn't just end up in our hands and that's what it is. There is this whole story and this whole life that it lived before it ended up in our hands. So for Project Skiep, I gathered this story into a book, which is the book Project Skiep. And here, all the people who joined me in this project and all the craftsmen that helped me obtain this knowledge and all these skills, they are in this book. The root that we cycled, of course, Also technical details of every step. What is carding? How do you dye yarn? What are all the technical things that you need to know? Yeah, so to replicate the bag would be, I guess, nearly impossible. But what I can replicate, of course, is the book. And that is my goal now. So I'm starting up this crowdfunding to eventually publish my book, to get it print ready and to publish it. So if you're interested in supporting this project and sharing this story, then you can go to my website and leave your email address, or you can come to me after the presentation. The book is sold for 30 euros, but if you want to donate more or less, it's all fine. It would be super cool if you want to support this project. And yeah, I guess all that's left to say now is that if you want to unravel a story, you will have to find the beginning. Thank you.